Okay, you'll have to excuse my voice. I lost it today, so just bear with me. So if I was called into my principal's office and they were asking me about the checks lab, I would tell them that the students were asking questions and defining problems because they were asking questions about why this family was going where they were going and spending the amount of money that they were at those particular places. And they were to define that. And so with that comes the next step of like analyzing and interpreting the data. They had to analyze the amount of money. They had to interpret it first, because if they pulled out, say, one about going to the hospital, one about buying a car, one about, I can't even remember. But anyway, they had to interpret why that money was getting spent, why those checks were being written to those specific places at that specific time. They had to construct explanations. So my students weren't given any background on the checks. They were just given the checks themselves, and they had to construct an explanation of why that was happening. And then they were also evaluating and communicating information between each other in groups in the classroom. The OAS standards that this activity kind of lines up with is students use evidence to construct an explanation. And so with this, the checks were the evidence. It wasn't, I don't know, informative, straight out evidence, but it was evidence that they could use to then construct an explanation. And they could go back to the checks to explain that explanation that they came up with. Students can ask questions and predict outcomes. So again, they had to ask questions within their groups to find out what was kind of going on with that, and they had to predict why that family was spending that kind of money at those places. Students can generate and compare multiple solutions. So different students will have different ideas about why the family that we were looking at spent different amounts of money at different places. And so the students were able to compare their solutions together as a group and talk those through. Students can analyze and interpret data. Again, that's what they had to interpret the checks. And then students can obtain and combine information. And so they had to, first, they knew the checks, that was the information they were obtaining, and then they had to combine those checks in order to figure out what they were doing. So that's basically what I would tell my principal about that, is the checks lab was getting my students to critically think and interpret data.